My fiancée left me after 7 years and demanded I keep paying her bills, so I exposed her lies to everyone and watched her perfect life crumble in 30 days. I thought we were building something permanent together, two people working toward the same future. I was wrong about everything, especially about who Madison really was beneath all the planning and promises. It was a Tuesday evening in March when Madison came home from work with that distant look I'd started recognizing more frequently over the past few months. I was in our kitchen making dinner, something I'd been doing more often since she'd been working later, claiming her new corporate law position demanded longer hours. She set her designer purse on the counter, one I'd helped her buy as a congratulations gift when she passed the bar exam, and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, almost clinical. "Tyler, we need to talk," she said, not even acknowledging the dinner I'd prepared. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about where I am in my life right now." I turned off the stove, sensing this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. For 7 years, we talked through everything together: her law school stress, my engineering projects, her failed attempts at starting her own practice, our plans to get married next spring. I thought we were a team. "What's on your mind?" I asked, genuinely concerned she might be overwhelmed with work stress. That's when she delivered the line that changed everything: "I've outgrown this relationship, Tyler. I'm not the same person I was when we started dating, and honestly, neither are you. I think it's time we both moved on." The words hit me like a physical blow. Outgrown. Like I was some childhood phase she'd moved past. 7 years of shared dreams, mutual support, and building a life together, reduced to something she'd simply outgrown. "Madison, where is this coming from? Yesterday you were talking about wedding venues, and now you're ending our engagement." She sighed like I was being deliberately dense. "I've been planning this conversation for months, Tyler. I didn't want to hurt you, but I can't keep pretending this is enough for me anymore. I'm moving to Miami next month for a corporate position with Henderson and Associates. It's exactly the kind of opportunity I've been working toward my entire career." Once. She'd been planning to leave me for months while I was still picking out engagement rings and discussing mortgage options. While I was supporting her through yet another career transition, helping with her student loan payments, covering our shared expenses so she could focus on finding the right position. "So that's it?" I asked. 7 years, and you just decide we're done?" "It's not that simple," she said, pulling out her phone like she was checking items off a to-do list. "There are practical matters we need to discuss. I can't just walk away from everything immediately, that wouldn't be fair to either of us." I should have known there was more coming. Madison never did anything without calculating every angle, every potential benefit to herself. "I've made a list of my monthly expenses that I'll need help with while I transition to independence. It's not unreasonable, Tyler. After everything I've contributed to this relationship, the least you can do is help me get established in my new life." She handed me a printed document, actually printed, like she'd prepared this in advance, detailing monthly expenses totaling $3,200. Car lease payments for the BMW I'd co-signed for. Credit card payments for purchases I'd assumed we were sharing. Spa memberships, gym fees, even her monthly hair appointments. "Madison, these are your personal expenses. Why would I continue paying for your lifestyle after you're gone?" "Because I contributed emotionally to this relationship for 7 years, she said without a trace of irony. "I supported your career, attended your work functions, managed our social calendar. That has value, Tyler. I'm not asking for alimony, we're not married, but I think 6 months of financial support while I establish myself is more than reasonable." The audacity was breathtaking. She was dumping me, moving across the country for a job she'd hidden from me, and demanding I continue funding her lifestyle as some sort of severance package for being my girlfriend. "I need you to be mature about this," she continued. "I know you're hurt, but we can handle this like adults. 6 months, Tyler. That's all I'm asking." That night, after she'd gone to her sister's place to give me space to process, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation from the past few months, looking for signs I'd missed. The way she'd been vague about her job interviews, the mysterious phone calls she'd taken in the other room, the increasing criticism of our small-town mentality and lack of ambition. Then I remembered something that made my stomach drop. 3 months ago, Madison had suggested we consolidate our finances more efficiently. She'd convinced me to add her name to my savings account while keeping her own account separate for professional reasons. I'd thought it was a step toward deeper commitment. The next morning, I checked our joint account online and felt my world tilt on its axis. Over the past 6 months, Madison had been systematically transferring money from our shared expenses into her personal account. Small amounts, never enough to trigger my attention, but consistent. While I'd been paying our rent, utilities, groceries, and her various monthly subscriptions, she'd been skimming money and building her own private nest egg. According to the bank records, she'd accumulated over $18,000 in her personal account, money that should have been contributing to our shared expenses and future together. She'd been planning her exit strategy for months, systematically draining our shared resources while letting me believe we were building something permanent. Madison hadn't outgrown our relationship. She'd been strategically dismantling it while ensuring she had the financial freedom to walk away on her own terms. The woman I'd been planning to marry had been systematically lying to me, stealing from me, and manipulating me for months, all while making me feel like I wasn't good enough for her ambitions. I realized then that I'd been living with a stranger who saw me not as a partner, but as a resource to be exploited until something better came along. The Madison I thought I loved had never actually existed. When Madison returned the next evening, she walked in carrying a folder like she was presenting a business proposal to a client. I was sitting at our kitchen table, still processing the bank statements I'd printed out, trying to make sense of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. She set the folder down with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. "I know yesterday was a lot to take in," she said, settling into the chair across from me like we were negotiating a contract. "So I've put together a more detailed breakdown of what I'll need from you over the next 6 months. I think when you see it laid out clearly, you'll understand how reasonable I'm being." She opened the folder and slid a typed document across the table. It was 3 pages long, itemized with the precision of a legal brief. Monthly car payment, $485. Insurance, $180. Credit cards, $800. Gym membership, $120. Spa package, $300. Clothing allowance, $400. Groceries and dining, $600. Phone bill, $85. Miscellaneous expenses, $230. Total, $3,200 per month for 6 months. Madison, this is insane. You're asking me to pay $19,000 to support you after you dump me? It's not $19,000, she corrected with the tone she used to use on difficult clients. It's an investment in both of our futures. This transition needs to be handled properly, Tyler. If you force me into a desperate financial situation, I'll have no choice but to protect myself. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. I'd seen Madison in lawyer mode before, but never directed at me. What exactly does that mean? It means I have documentation of our entire relationship, Tyler. Voice recordings, text messages, financial records. If you try to make this difficult for me, I'll have no choice but to share my version of events with people who matter to both of us. My blood went cold. Your version of events? About how controlling and financially manipulative you've been. How you used money to keep me dependent and isolated. How you made me feel trapped in this relationship for years. The accusation was so backwards, so perfectly inverted from reality, that I almost laughed. Madison, I supported your career. I paid for your bar exam prep, your professional wardrobe, your networking events. How is that controlling? You made me dependent on you, she said, leaning forward like she was explaining something obvious to a slow child. Every time I tried to assert my independence, you'd remind me of all the things you were paying for. Classic financial abuse tactics. I stared at her, wondering if she actually believed what she was saying or if this was just another calculated manipulation. I have 3 years of couples therapy notes, she continued, where I documented feeling controlled and diminished in this relationship. Dr. Morrison will verify that I've been working toward the courage to leave this unhealthy dynamic. 3 years of therapy where we'd worked on communication and future planning, where I'd thought we were strengthening our relationship. She'd been building a legal case against me the entire time. And I've already spoken with several of our mutual friends, she added, almost casually. They're very concerned about some of the things I've shared with them about your behavior, especially the financial control and emotional manipulation. What things, Madison? What exactly have you been telling people? The truth about what it's been like living with someone who uses money as a weapon. Someone who makes every financial decision unilaterally and then acts like a generous benefactor when really he's just maintaining control. I felt like I was in some alternate reality where 7 years of mutual support and shared decision-making had been rewritten as a story of abuse and control. I never controlled your finances. You had your own account, your own job. An account you insisted I keep separate while you managed all the important expenses. Classic isolation tactics, Tyler. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of screenshots. Text messages between her and friends, voice memo transcripts, even photos of me looking stern or frustrated during arguments. I've been documenting the patterns for months. How you'd get angry when I spent money on myself, how you'd sulk when I wanted to go out with friends, how you'd use your higher salary to make me feel guilty about my career choices. Every screenshot was real, but stripped of context, edited to support her narrative. A text where I'd asked her to discuss a large purchase became evidence of financial control. A photo of me looking frustrated during an argument about wedding planning became proof of emotional manipulation. She'd been systematically building a case against me while I thought we were planning our future together. This is incredible, I said, genuinely amazed by the scope of her deception. You've been planning this character assassination for months. I've been protecting myself, she replied smoothly. And if you're smart, you'll protect yourself too. 6 months of support, Tyler. It's a small price to pay to ensure this transition happens quietly and amicably. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to defend myself publicly. The ultimatum was crystal clear: pay her demands, or she'd destroy my reputation with everyone we knew. She'd turn me into the villain in the story of our relationship, painting herself as the brave victim who finally escaped my controlling grasp. That night, unable to sleep again, I did something I'd never imagined doing in our relationship. I started going through our shared digital accounts, looking for evidence of what had really been happening while I thought we were building a life together. What I found in our cloud storage made everything clear. Madison had been methodically documenting our relationship for over a year, but not the way she'd presented it to me. Hidden in folders labeled legal research and career development, I found her real records. Audio files of our conversations where she'd deliberately provoke arguments, then edit out her instigation to make me look unreasonable. Screenshots of our joint account transactions with her transfers cropped out, making it appear I was controlling all our money. Even a drafted email to her sister from 6 months ago, outlining her exit strategy and timeline for leaving me while maximizing financial compensation for emotional damages sustained. She'd been planning this like a hostile corporate takeover, systematically gathering ammunition while positioning herself as the injured party. I'd been living with someone who saw our relationship as a legal case she was building against me. The next morning, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I called in sick to work and drove to downtown to meet with David Chin, a private investigator my lawyer colleague had recommended. I'd never imagined needing a PI in my personal life, but Madison's threats had made it clear this wasn't going to be a normal breakup. David was exactly what you'd expect from someone in his profession: quiet, observant, and completely unfazed by my story. "She's threatening to destroy your reputation with manufactured evidence," he summarized after I'd explained the situation. "And she's demanding substantial financial support based on emotional contributions to your relationship. You suspect there's more to her story than she's telling you." I know there's more. The timeline doesn't add up. She claims she just decided to leave, but she's been planning this for months. The job in Miami, the documentation, the financial maneuvering, it's too coordinated to be spontaneous. David nodded, making notes in a leather portfolio. "What specifically do you want me to investigate?" "Everything. Her job situation, her finances, her timeline." She's demanding 6 months of support, but I think she's been lying about more than just her exit strategy. How much are we talking about for your monthly expenses? She's asking for $3,200 a month, but our actual shared expenses were maybe $1,800. The difference was going into her personal account without my knowledge. David's expression sharpened. She was skimming from joint expenses while building a separate financial cushion? That's not just relationship manipulation, that could be financial fraud, depending on how your accounts were structured. 3 days later, David called with preliminary findings that exceeded my worst suspicions. Tyler, we need to meet in person. What I've found is going to upset you, but you need to see everything. We met at a coffee shop downtown, and David slid a manila envelope across the table. Your fiancée has been having an affair with Derek Morrison, her new boss at Henderson and Associates, for the past 8 months. They've been meeting at hotels charged to your joint credit card, and she's been buying him expensive gifts with your money. I stared at the surveillance photos, Madison and a man I'd never seen before, clearly intimate, entering hotels I recognized from our credit card statements. Charges I'd assumed were for her work networking events. How long has this been going on? Based on credit card records and surveillance, it started last July. Right around the time she told you she was getting more serious about her career prospects. July. While I was planning our engagement and discussing mortgage options, she was starting an affair with her future boss. There's more, David continued. She lied about her salary. Henderson and Associates is paying her $180,000 annually, not the $90,000 she told you. She's making more than double your engineering salary. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Madison wasn't the struggling lawyer I'd been supporting. She was already financially independent and had been for months. She's been telling Derek she's single and self-supporting. According to my source at Henderson and Associates, she's presented herself as an ambitious professional who's worked her way up from poverty through her own determination. Derek has no idea she's been living with someone else or that she's demanding financial support from a previous relationship. I flipped through the evidence David had compiled. Credit card statements showing $15,000 in charges for hotels, restaurants, and gifts that I now realized were funding her affair. Bank records proving her real salary. Even photos of Madison and Derek at company events where she was clearly presenting herself as available and unattached. She's been playing both of you, David said quietly, living a double life while positioning herself to maximize benefits from both relationships. The financial manipulation with you, the career advancement with Derek. Does Derek's wife know about the affair? Derek Morrison is married with 2 teenage daughters. His wife Linda is a high school principal, very respected in their community. She has no idea her husband is having an affair with his new hire. The picture was becoming devastatingly clear. Madison hadn't just been planning to leave me, she'd been orchestrating a complex deception involving multiple people, using my money to fund an affair while building a professional relationship that would secure her future. She'd been living a completely fabricated life, telling me she needed my financial support while earning nearly twice my salary, telling Derek she was single and independent while demanding I continue paying her expenses. What do you recommend? I asked David. Document everything, but don't confront her directly yet. She's already built a narrative where you're the controlling ex-boyfriend. If you approach this wrong, she'll use your knowledge of her affair as proof of your obsessive behavior. David was right. Madison had already positioned herself as the victim in our relationship. If I accused her of cheating, she'd claim I was stalking her and violating her privacy. But there are other ways to handle this, David continued with a slight smile. Sometimes the best approach is to let people reveal their own character through their choices. Madison's entire Miami plan depends on maintaining her lies to multiple people. What if those lies started unraveling naturally? I looked at the evidence spread across the table, months of systematic deception, financial fraud, and manipulation that went far deeper than I'd ever imagined. Madison hadn't just fallen out of love with me, she'd been actively betraying me while building a new life on a foundation of lies. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt something other than hurt and confusion. I felt the cold satisfaction of understanding exactly who I was dealing with, and I was ready to let her face the consequences of her own choices. David and I spent the next week developing what he called a strategic disclosure plan. Essentially, we were going to let Madison's own lies destroy the life she'd built on deception, but we had to be surgical about it. The key was ensuring that each revelation appeared to come from natural consequences rather than vindictive exposure from me. The beauty of her situation, David explained, is that she's told completely different stories to different people. When those stories collide, she won't be able to maintain the deception. Your job is to simply facilitate those collisions. Our first target was Derek Morrison. Through David's contact at Henderson and Associates, we learned that Derek had been bragging about his brilliant and independent new hire who'd overcome personal adversity to build her career. He had no idea that Madison's success story was funded by another man's paycheck, or that she was currently demanding continued financial support from her previous relationship. Derek's wife Linda needs to know about the affair, I told David during one of our planning sessions. But it can't come from me directly. Agreed. Anonymous tips look vindictive. But what if Linda discovered the affair through evidence that Madison herself created? David had a contact who could anonymously send Linda copies of the hotel bills and credit card statements, with a simple note. Thought you should know where your husband has been spending his time. A concerned friend. The evidence would speak for itself, dates, locations, charges that clearly showed an ongoing affair. Linda would confront Derek, Derek would realize Madison had been lying about being single, and Madison's entire Miami plan would crumble under the weight of her own deceptions. Meanwhile, I focused on our mutual friends whom Madison had been manipulating with her victim narrative. I didn't need to defend myself directly, I just needed to provide them with facts and let them draw their own conclusions. I started with Jennifer Walsh, Madison's closest friend from law school and someone who'd been particularly cold to me lately. Instead of explaining Madison's manipulation, I simply forwarded Jennifer the bank records showing Madison's secret transfers and her real salary information. Jen, Madison asked me not to share this, but I thought you should know the real financial situation since you've been so supportive during her difficult time. As you can see from these bank statements, she's been earning significantly more than she told us and has substantial savings. I hope this helps you understand why I can't continue supporting her lifestyle after our relationship ends. Thanks for being such a good friend to her. The message was perfectly crafted. I appeared to be protecting Madison's privacy while actually revealing her lies. Jennifer would see that Madison had been deceiving everyone about her financial independence while portraying herself as vulnerable and dependent. Next was Michael Santos, a mutual friend from my engineering firm whom Madison had approached about the financial abuse she'd been suffering. Instead of defending myself, I sent Michael copies of Madison's written demands for continued financial support, along with documentation of her real income. Mike, Madison mentioned she's been talking to friends about our breakup. I want you to have the full picture since she's been sharing her perspective. These are the actual financial support demands she's made, along with her real salary information. I think you'll understand why I feel her requests are unreasonable. I appreciate your friendship during this difficult time. Again, I wasn't attacking Madison directly, I was simply providing factual information and letting people judge for themselves. The brilliance of David's strategy was that every revelation would seem like natural consequences of Madison's own choices. Derek's wife discovering the affair through evidence Madison created with my credit cards. Friends realizing Madison had been lying about her financial situation through documentation she demanded I provide. Her family learning about her manipulation tactics through her own written demands for support. The most important thing, David reminded me, is that you remain completely professional and sympathetic throughout this process. Never speak negatively about Madison directly. Always express concern for her well-being and regret that things didn't work out. Let the evidence speak for itself. On Friday evening, exactly 2 weeks after Madison's initial demands, I set the plan in motion. Linda Morrison received the anonymous package containing copies of hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and credit card statements clearly showing her husband's 8-month affair. Jennifer Walsh got the bank records revealing Madison's deception about her finances and independence. Michael Santos received Madison's written demands alongside proof of her real salary. Madison's sister Rebecca got copies of the exit strategy emails I'd found in our cloud storage, showing months of premeditated planning while Madison was still pretending to work toward our future together. Each person received just enough information to understand they'd been deceived, without any commentary or personal attacks from me. The facts would speak for themselves, and Madison would have to face the consequences of her own elaborate web of lies. By Monday morning, Madison's carefully constructed narrative would begin crumbling as the people she'd manipulated started comparing notes and realizing the scope of her deception. She'd built her entire Miami plan on a foundation of lies told to different people, and those lies were about to collide in spectacular fashion. I spent that weekend preparing for the fallout, knowing that once Madison realized her deception was unraveling, she'd probably try to escalate her threats against me. But for the first time in weeks, I felt calm and confident. I wasn't attacking her, I was simply letting her face the natural consequences of her own choices. Madison had gambled that she could manipulate multiple people simultaneously without those lies ever intersecting. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been. Monday morning started with a text from Madison that immediately told me the plan was working. Something's happening at work. Derek's acting strange and won't return my calls. Did you do something? I responded with genuine confusion. I have no idea what you're talking about. Is everything okay? What I didn't tell her was that David had already informed me about the weekend's developments. Linda Morrison had confronted her husband Saturday evening with evidence of his affair, leading to what neighbors described as a screaming match that lasted until 2 a.m. Derek had immediately ended things with Madison via text message Sunday morning, stating that he needed to focus on saving his marriage and couldn't risk any further contact with her. By Tuesday, Madison was in full panic mode. Tyler, I need to talk to you immediately. People are spreading lies about me, and I think you're behind it. We met at a coffee shop near her office, and I could see the stress was already taking its toll. Madison looked exhausted, her usual polished appearance replaced by something that seemed almost desperate. Derek's wife somehow got hold of private information about our relationship, she said, leaning across the table like she was sharing classified intelligence. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, things that only someone with access to our financial records could have provided. That's terrible, I replied, maintaining the concerned ex-boyfriend tone David had coached me to use. How would she get access to that kind of information? Someone gave it to her, Tyler. Someone who wanted to destroy my relationship and sabotage my career. Someone who has access to our joint accounts and a motive to hurt me. The accusation was clear, but I just looked confused. Madison, I would never do something like that. Why would I want to hurt your career? I've always supported your professional goals. Because you're angry about the breakup and you want to punish me for moving on with my life. I'm not happy about how things ended, I admitted, but I would never try to sabotage your relationships or career. That's not who I am. She stared at me, clearly trying to determine if I was lying. The beauty of David's strategy was that I wasn't technically lying. I hadn't directly contacted Derek's wife or provided information to her personally. Well, someone did, she said finally. And now Derek won't even speak to me. He said his wife is threatening to file for divorce and expose the affair to his partners at the firm. He's completely panicked about losing his career over this. I'm sorry that's happening, I said, and I genuinely was sorry that her lies had finally caught up with her. Maybe it's better that the truth came out now, before you got more involved. The truth? Her voice rose slightly. The truth is that someone is trying to destroy my life out of spite, and I have a pretty good idea who. Before I could respond, her phone started buzzing with text messages. I watched her face go pale as she read them. What is it? I asked. Jennifer's asking about bank statements and savings accounts. She's saying people are questioning my financial situation and whether I've been honest about needing support. The revelations were cascading exactly as David had predicted. Madison's different lies to different people were colliding, and she was struggling to maintain her various narratives simultaneously. Madison, maybe you should just be honest with people about your situation. If you don't actually need financial help, of course I need help, she snapped, then caught herself and lowered her voice. The salary they quoted me includes bonuses and benefits that aren't guaranteed. I can't count on that money being stable. Even now, caught in her deception, she was inventing new lies to maintain the old ones. By Wednesday, the situation had escalated beyond Madison's control. Her sister Rebecca called me directly, something she'd never done before. "Tyler, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me," Rebecca said. "Madison's been telling our family that you've been financially controlling and that she needs our help because you're refusing to support her transition to independence. But I received some documents that suggest she's been planning this breakup for months while hiding substantial income and savings." "Rebecca, I don't want to put you in the middle of this," I replied carefully. "Madison and I have different perspectives on our relationship and how it ended." "These aren't perspectives, Tyler. These are documents showing she's been systematically transferring money into private accounts while letting you pay all the shared expenses. This looks like she's been stealing from you." The conversation with Rebecca was brief, but I could tell Madison's family was beginning to see through her victim narrative. By Thursday, Madison was desperate enough to show up at my workplace, something she'd never done in 7 years of dating. I found her waiting in the lobby, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Tyler, my entire life is falling apart, and I know you're behind it," she said without preamble. "Derek ended things completely. My friends are questioning everything I've told them. My family thinks I'm a liar and a thief. This can't be coincidence. Madison, I'm sorry you're going through this, but maybe the problem isn't that people are spreading lies about you. Maybe the problem is that people are learning the truth." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "The truth is that I made one mistake. I fell in love with someone I worked with while trying to figure out how to end our relationship respectfully. Everything else I did was trying to protect both of us during a difficult transition." Even faced with the complete collapse of her deception, Madison was still rewriting history to cast herself as the victim. "Protecting us by hiding your real income while demanding I continue supporting you? Protecting us by building a legal case against me while planning your exit strategy." Her face went white. "How do you know about your exit strategy emails? The ones where you calculated how to maximize financial compensation for emotional damages? Madison, you documented your own deception." For the first time since this began, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She realized that her own evidence, her own planning, her own lies were now working against her. The careful manipulation she'd orchestrated was collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. By Friday morning, Madison's professional life began crumbling as quickly as her personal relationships had. David called me with an update that exceeded even our expectations. Henderson and Associates has placed Madison on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Apparently, Derek's wife didn't just confront her husband. She filed a formal complaint with HR about workplace misconduct and potential misuse of company resources. The dominoes were falling exactly as we'd anticipated, but faster than I'd imagined possible. Madison had built her entire Miami plan around her relationship with Derek and her position at Henderson and Associates. Without Derek's protection and with HR investigating their affair, her dream job was evaporating. "What kind of investigation?" I asked David. "Everything. The hotel charges on your joint credit card that funded their affair, the expensive gifts she bought Derek with your money, the potential conflict of interest in their working relationship. HR is treating this as a serious ethics violation." Meanwhile, the social fallout was equally devastating. Jennifer Walsh had shared Madison's real financial information with their law school friend group, and the response was swift and unforgiving. Women who had been sympathetically supporting Madison through her difficult transition were now furious about being manipulated and lied to. Michael Santos called me directly to apologize. "Tyler, I owe you an apology. Madison had me convinced you were some kind of financial abuser, but after seeing those documents you sent, I realized she's been playing all of us. That list of demands she gave you is absolutely insane, especially considering her real salary." "I appreciate that, Mike," I replied. "I never wanted to put our friends in the middle of this situation." "You didn't put us in the middle. Madison did when she started lying to everyone about what really happened between you two." Several of us are comparing notes now, and her story has more holes than Swiss cheese. The mutual friend group that Madison had worked so hard to turn against me was now actively discussing her deception and manipulation tactics. People were sharing screenshots of her different stories, comparing timelines, and realizing the scope of her lies. By Saturday, Madison's living situation had become untenable. The luxury apartment she'd planned to rent in Miami, the one she'd been bragging about on social media, had rejected her application after a background check revealed her workplace investigation and the questions surrounding her financial stability. She'd been forced to move back in with her parents temporarily, a devastating blow to someone who'd spent months cultivating an image of independence and success. Rebecca called me again with an update. "Tyler, our parents are furious with Madison. Not just about the lying but about how she treated you. Mom actually said she's ashamed of how Madison behaved, and Dad's talking about cutting off her financial support completely." "I'm sorry your family is going through this," I said, genuinely meaning it. "Madison's always been welcome in our home, but what she did to you is unforgivable. She manipulated everyone, stole money from your joint accounts, and then tried to destroy your reputation when you wouldn't continue funding her lifestyle. That's not who we raised her to be." The conversation with Rebecca revealed something I hadn't expected. Madison's parents were so disgusted by her behavior that they were considering cutting off all financial support, leaving her completely on her own for the first time in her adult life. On Sunday, Jennifer Walsh called with news that completed Madison's social isolation. "Tyler, I need you to know that none of us are maintaining friendships with Madison after what we've learned. The lying, the manipulation, the way she tried to turn us all against you. It's sociopathic behavior. We're all horrified that we believed her stories." "I never wanted this to destroy her friendships," I replied. "I just wanted people to understand the real situation." "You didn't destroy anything, Tyler. Madison did this to herself when she decided to build her entire new life on lies. We're actually planning to reach out to you soon. Several of us want to apologize for how we treated you based on her false stories." The friend group that had been Madison's primary source of emotional support and social validation was now completely gone. People who had been sympathetic to her victim narrative were now actively avoiding her, disgusted by the scope of her deception. By Monday morning, exactly 2 weeks after I'd initiated David's strategic disclosure plan, Madison's carefully constructed new life had completely collapsed. Her affair with Derek was over, her dream job was in jeopardy, her luxury apartment had fallen through, her friends had abandoned her, and her family was questioning whether to continue supporting her financially. The woman who had demanded I continue paying her expenses while she transitioned to her independent, new life was now facing the reality of actual independence, and discovering she was completely unprepared for it. David called with a final update. "Tyler, I think our work here is done. Madison's lies have created their own consequences, and there's nothing left for us to expose. She's going to have to rebuild her entire life from scratch, and this time she won't have anyone else's money or emotional support to rely on." I felt a mixture of satisfaction and genuine pity. Madison had gambled everything on her ability to manipulate multiple people simultaneously, and she'd lost spectacularly. But seeing the complete destruction of her life wasn't as satisfying as I'd expected it would be. Mostly, I just felt relieved that I'd discovered who she really was before we'd gotten married and legally entangled our lives together. 3 weeks later, the final pieces of Madison's collapse fell into place with a swiftness that surprised even David. Henderson and Associates concluded their investigation and terminated Madison's employment for violation of their ethics policies, specifically the misuse of company resources and inappropriate workplace relationships. The termination letter, which Rebecca shared with me after Madison left it lying around their parents' house, cited conduct incompatible with professional standards and breach of client confidentiality protocols. Apparently, Madison had been using company resources to plan personal activities during work hours, including booking hotels and restaurants for her affair with Derek. "She's been blacklisted," David informed me during our final meeting. "Word travels fast in Miami's legal community, and her termination for ethics violations has made her essentially unemployable at any reputable firm. She'll have to start over in a different city or consider leaving law entirely." Meanwhile, my own life was taking a completely different trajectory. The promotion I'd been working toward for months finally came through. Senior systems engineer with a $15,000 salary increase and the respect of colleagues who'd watched me handle my personal crisis with dignity and professionalism. More importantly, I'd started seeing Jennifer Hayes, a fellow engineer from our sister company who joined our team for a collaborative project. Jennifer was everything Madison wasn't. Genuinely independent, financially responsible, emotionally mature, and interested in building something together rather than extracting maximum benefit from a relationship. I have to admit, Jennifer said over dinner at a restaurant I'd chosen and she'd insisted on splitting the check for, when Mike Santos first introduced us, he warned me you were getting over a difficult breakup. But the way you've handled everything has been really impressive. You never spoke badly about your ex, never seemed bitter, just focused on moving forward. Madison made her own choices, I replied. I'm not responsible for the consequences of her decisions, but I'm grateful they revealed her character before we got married. Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. It takes real strength to handle betrayal that way. A lot of people would have wanted revenge. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had gotten revenge, but in a way that required no cruelty or vindictiveness from me. Madison's own lies had been sufficient to destroy the life she'd built on deception. 2 months after Madison's termination, she made one final attempt to salvage her situation by reaching out to me through a letter delivered to my workplace. Tyler, I know I made terrible mistakes and hurt you deeply. I was scared about our future and made selfish choices that I'll regret for the rest of my life. Derek was a mistake, a way of trying to convince myself I was ready for independence when I wasn't. The lying about money was inexcusable. I was trying to protect myself financially while still keeping you as my safety net, and I realize now how manipulative and cruel that was. I've lost everything: my job, my friends, Derek, my family's respect, and worst of all, I'm not asking you to take me back, but I'm hoping you might be willing to help me understand how to rebuild my life without repeating these mistakes. I realize now that what we had was real, and I threw it away for fantasies that turned out to be lies. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I sabotaged the best relationship I've ever had. Would you be willing to meet with me just to talk? I promise I'm not trying to manipulate you again, I just don't know how to move forward from this. I showed the letter to Jennifer, who read it with the analytical mind of someone trained in systems thinking. She's still not taking full responsibility, Jennifer observed. She's blaming fear and Derek and circumstances rather than acknowledging that she made calculated choices to deceive and manipulate multiple people for months. This reads like someone who's sorry she got caught, not someone who understands why her behavior was fundamentally wrong. Jennifer was absolutely right. Even in her supposed confession and plea for help, Madison was still crafting a narrative that minimized her agency in creating the disaster of her life. I drafted a brief response. Madison, I appreciate your letter and I'm glad you're seeking professional help to understand your choices. However, I don't think there's anything productive to be gained from further contact between us. I've moved on with my life and I recommend you focus on doing the same. I wish you well in your future endeavors. 6 months later, I learned through Rebecca that Madison had moved to Portland and taken a job at a small firm handling workers' compensation cases, a dramatic step down from corporate law, but steady employment. Her parents had eventually restored limited financial support after she'd completed several months of therapy and demonstrated genuine efforts to rebuild her life independently. She asks about you sometimes, Rebecca told me during a chance encounter at a coffee shop. Not in a romantic way, but I think she genuinely regrets how everything ended. She's working to pay back the money she transferred from your joint accounts. That's good to hear, I said, meaning it. I hope she's learned from what happened and can build a better life for herself. She has, Rebecca assured me. But I think she finally understands what she lost. You were good for her, Tyler, and she threw it away for something that was never real. A year after Madison's letter, Jennifer and I got engaged in a quiet ceremony that perfectly reflected who we were as a couple: thoughtful, genuine, focused on substance over appearance. No dramatic proposals or expensive rings, just 2 people who'd found each other and decided to build something together based on honesty, mutual respect, and shared values. The contrast with my relationship with Madison couldn't have been more stark. Where Madison had demanded financial support while contributing nothing, Jennifer insisted on complete financial equality. Where Madison had threatened to destroy my reputation when challenged, Jennifer encouraged open communication about problems. Where Madison had built elaborate lies to maintain her image, Jennifer valued authentic connection over social media appearances. As I watched Madison's carefully constructed life crumble under the weight of her own deceptions, I realized that the best revenge truly was living well. I didn't need to destroy Madison. She'd done that to herself through her choices. All I needed to do was step back and let the truth speak for itself, while building the life I actually wanted with someone who deserved it.